Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this side event of the United Nations Environmental Assembly on accelerating a just transition to a circular economy in Africa. We will be hearing from a range of distinguished speakers about all of the various ways in which the continent and its partners are working towards realizing the vision of a truly circular economy for the continent. And you should see it coming up as what areas should Africa focus on the most to promote the transition towards a circular economy. That should come up on your platform now. We look forward to your answers. And with that, as you're filling in those answers, I think we'll come back to your answers later on, just with an eye on time. I will go ahead and invite essentially our host, Frank Turiatunga, the Acting Director of the Africa Office of the United Nations Environment Program, to make some opening remarks and kick us off things like this. Frank, over
Thank you very much, moderator. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by thanking you for your participation in this UNEA 5.2 side event on accelerating a just transition to a circular economy in Africa. This event provides a platform for member states and stakeholders to share and discuss how to implement circular economy policies, principles, practices, and action plans in Africa. We extend our appreciation to the African Development Bank for jointly organizing this side event with UNEP. In addition, we thank the European Union for its continued support to the Switch Africa Green and other programs, without which this event would not have taken place. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is clear that there is a general appreciation of the benefits of circular economy, and more importantly, action towards this transition to a circular economy has started. But how can we ensure that Africa is not left behind? Enabling policy options and instruments are needed to support a just transition to a circular economy and tackle the challenges that are slowly limiting the implementation of circularity across the respective sectors. These enabling factors include supportive policy, institutional and regulatory frameworks, access to finance, access to markets, and capacity development to implement circularity practices. This calls for collective efforts by all actors, where each of the actors brings their comparative advantage to the table. UNEP, as one of the partners, is spearheading circular economy and has developed the UNEP Circularity Platform, which provides an understanding of the circularity concept, its scope, and how it contributes to promoting sustainable consumption and production patterns. Our work in promoting circularity is cognizant of the fact that a circular economy and sustainable consumption and production are essential to delivering on multilateral environmental agreements, from Sustainable Development Goals to the Paris Agreement to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, just to mention a few. In Africa, UNEP is promoting circular economy through a number of initiatives, which include using circularity and sustainable consumption and production for improved waste management, sustainable health and inclusive food systems, innovative business practices and economic models in textile value chain, developing guidelines for accelerating the transition towards circular economy in Africa, and carrying out an assessment of green financing mechanisms for micro, small, medium, and medium enterprises in the region through the Switch Africa Green program. Circularity is essential to sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. In response to the pandemic, Africa launched the Africa Green Stimulus Program through its Ministerial Conference on the Environment to support the continent's recovery response in a sustainable manner to its devastating socio-economic and environmental impacts. This program supplements the African Union's Green Recovery Action Plan 2021-2027, by enabling countries and regions to take bolder action through integrating environmental considerations in their plans and programs, and to build on recovery action already in place. I'm pleased to remind you that during the proceedings of UNEA 5.2, the Africa Group is promoting the draft resolution on enhancing circular economy. Our deliberations here this afternoon, therefore, are part of the discussions being held at this global platform. I look forward to the deliberations from governments and member states present here, and in addition, the support provided by development partners and financing institutions in promoting circular economy in Africa. It is a clear indication that we cannot walk this journey alone, but need more partnerships, collaboration, and engagements within the region and beyond. I would like to encourage all of us in this meeting today to carry on with the momentum, create linkages, strengthen capacity, and support strong partnerships to accelerate the transition to a circular economy in Africa. I wish you all good deliberations and successful engagements during UNEA 5.2. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kiriatunga, for grounding us both in the breadth and the depth of the work on the circular economy here in Africa and setting us off on this conversation. Coming up next is Mr. Virginius Sinkevicius. I hope I said that correctly.
Extremely well.
The European Commissioner for Environment, Ocean and Fisheries. Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and of course, thank you for this invitation. It's great to see circularity getting the attention it deserves at last, and to see it so high on the political agenda. When we look at the impacts on the planet, the global human footprint, we see that 1/3 of pollution impacts, half of all CO2 emissions, and 90% of biodiversity loss are linked to materials and food. The conclusion is clear. More circularity will bring down all of those figures because it takes us towards a cleaner, low carbon, nature-friendly sort of economy. And to make that happen, we need a plan. So I think the most useful thing I can do today is show how we are approaching these questions in Europe, what our plans are, and how far we have advanced with their implementation. We do this in a very general way, with the European Green Deal, which has been steering EU policy for the past 2 years. It's a roadmap to low carbon sustainability built around the idea of a more circular economy. It has a long-term vision with a goal of carbon neutrality by the middle of the century in an inclusive, restorative, resource-efficient economy. The Green Deal comes with many elements, including a climate law, a biodiversity strategy, and a strategy for sustainable food. But it's also brought a specific EU circular economy action plan designed to reduce our consumption footprint and to double Europe's circular material use rate in the coming decade. At the heart of this plan is a new framework that we call the Sustainable Products Initiative. It aims at transforming the way we design products in Europe to make them more circular and resource efficient, reducing waste and minimizing environmental impacts throughout their life cycle. In the coming years, it will apply to an ever-growing group of products, and this broad ambition gives it genuinely transformative potential. We are not at our beginnings. Our circular transformation has already begun. Between 2012 and 2018, the number of direct jobs linked to the circular economy in the EU grew by 5% to reach around 4 million. And what is true for the EU is also true for Africa. Our studies show huge opportunities. Implementing a first set of circular measures in priority sectors in Africa would have positive outcomes for GDP, with 11 million additional jobs that could be created by 2030. And that growth would come with a lower environmental and climate impact than business as usual. Businesses know that the benefits will by far exceed the costs. We are talking of savings for companies, new business opportunities from the opening of new markets, or potentially increased revenues thanks to the possibility to create economic value from materials also at the end of their life cycles. It is therefore not surprising that economic actors are primary agents of change. They are doing so in Europe by modifying their asset use, by introducing new circular technologies and business models, or by committing to support the transition via initiatives such as the Circular Plastic Alliance. And it's not just Europe that is making the change. Many global companies, from Dell and HP to Lockheed Martin and Walmart, are all heading in this direction. The EU, UNEP, and UNIDOR have teamed up with, as of today, 15 countries, setting up the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, so-called GACIR. A third of these countries are African countries. That's another clear sign of the importance of Africa in steering the global circular transition. And I'm sure you are familiar with GACIR, as it was launched in the margins of UNEA 1 year ago now. The idea is to build on efforts that are already being deployed internationally. Notably by the African Circular Economy Alliance, there is considerable potential for closer cooperation and exchanges on policy frameworks. Investments and business-to-business relations with Africa, especially in the 5 priority sectors the Alliance has signaled out. This is why the European Commission just joined the African Alliance as a strategic partner. More and more we see African leaders promoting the circular economy in multilateral fora. The resolution on circular economy to be adopted at this UN Environment Assembly was tabled by the African Group. The resolution on a global agreement on plastics, which is gathering increasing support around the world, was proposed by Rwanda together with Peru. So right now, wherever you are in the world, the COVID-19 response is the #1 priority. But if we want a sustainable recovery, we need more circularity, not less. The choices we make now, the decisions on how to invest public and private recovery funding, will have a major impact on future generations. It's therefore more important than ever that policies discourage the business as usual practices that created the climate, biodiversity, and pollution crises we are experiencing today. Recovery funding can scale up circular economy frameworks and practices. It's a great opportunity to create decent jobs, reduce emissions, protect biodiversity, and improve resources efficiency. There has never been a better moment for circularity. But of course, it takes a political courage. That's not easy, anyway. But the more we spread the message in forums like this one, the more we exchange about successes, the more chance we have of making the shift happen. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinkovicius, in particular for grounding us in the idea of the economic opportunity that is available for embracing circularity and the very concrete measures that are already possible and indeed already underway. With that, we'll turn to Her Excellency Minister Barbara Creasy, Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries of South Africa. Minister Creasy, what plans are in place in South Africa to transition to a circular economy? And how does it fit within your broader economic plan?
Thank you very much, and greetings to fellow panelists and also all of the participants online. Well, I think that the former speaker has already spoken about the Circular Economy Action Plan for Africa, which has been initiated by the African Union, and South Africa is part of implementing that plan. And I think in recent times, as you've heard, the circular economy has emerged as an alternative production and consumption model. Now, central to the issues confronting ourselves when we consider this model, and I think fellow African countries, is the issue of the way in which the adoption of a circular economy model can assist the African continent and our particular countries with some of the abiding constraints that inhibit economic development. And these obviously would include issues such as unemployment, poverty, and infrastructure backlogs. And in our own country, we have battled with understanding that fine line because we have a very large industrial base and a significant plastics industry, and we've battled with finding that fine line between environmental protection on the one hand and sustainable economic development on the other. Now, we have understood that if we want to implement the circular economy effectively, we need to do so in partnership with the private sector. And in this regard, we have something that we call the extended producer responsibility schemes. And at the moment, we're working in 3 sectors: packaging, electronics, and lighting. And these regulations require that all producers in this area belong to a scheme that will lead reclaiming and recycling of waste in these 3 sectors. Now, I think that like most countries present at this forum, we are sincerely worried about plastic waste and the impact it is having on our rivers, our wetlands, and ultimately on our oceans. And we've been working hard with industry to try and develop mechanisms that will prevent the scourge. We have taken a decision not at this stage to ban single-use plastics, but we're working with Plastics SA and also with the Consumer Goods Council to actively try and change behavior. From the side of government, we've implemented a range of regulations that will amend plastic carrier bag regulations so that from January 2023, at least 50% of the content of these plastic bags must be made from recycled material, moving in 2027 to 100% being from recycled material. We've also worked with the retail sector and the fast food sector to try and remove single-use plastics in the form of takeaway containers, knives and forks, all of these kinds of things out of the value chain, and work with them on substituting alternative products so that we can reduce the amount of single-use plastic that's going into the environment. I think that before I conclude, I would want to just talk about the informal waste reclaiming sector. In our country, we estimate that there are more than 100,000 people who are involved in informal waste reclaiming. These people are doing the hard work of separation at source, which in many instances in municipalities in our environment are not able to do. Through these extended producer responsibility schemes, we are working together with the schemes to ensure that we establish buyback centers in different communities so that informal waste reclaimers should receive a decent remuneration for the hard work that they do. We're also working on making sure that in these buyback centers, we are introducing various forms of mechanization so that the work that the reclaimers do has increasing dignity and moves closer to the concept of decent work. Lastly, and I think most importantly, the long-term objective is to try and move the reclaimers from the reclaiming sector, which is the backbreaking work, to the recycling sector, which is where the profit and the money is. And this is something that we will be working on as government together with our partners in the private sector. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Minister Creasy, in particular for centering us again on the fact that across Africa, indeed millions of people already work in waste reclamation, in the circular economy, in informal conditions, doing backbreaking labor, and the potential opportunity in just bringing dignity, investment, and structure to this ongoing effort that is indeed a hallmark of the continent by necessity because of the scarcity that we face. With that, we will first of all look at, we'll come back to the poll. We had a question that was posed earlier at the beginning, and I'll ask that we pop up the results of that first question on screen if we can. So the first question was, what areas should Africa focus on the most to promote the transition towards a circular economy? And we are awaiting the results with bated breath. My eyesight is struggling. We had 26 people submitting responses. Among the most notable areas were food systems, packaging and recycling, electronics, construction, and all of the above got by far the most, which shows that we're thinking about the entire system. So there are some areas that some people see a particular focus on, but I think we are all agreed that this is not about picking one area or another necessarily. It's about recognizing that we do all of the above, but with some structure and some sequencing that may vary from context to context. With that, we'll go to the next question in the poll. Like I said, we will all sing for our supper, even those of you joining us in hybrid format online. So the next question is, maybe you just, and for those of you wanting to see the results of the polls, if you just click on your right-hand side, you can see the polls and their results. But question number 2 is, and I will read it out because it's not, there we go. Using your experience and knowledge, what is, again, just scroll through, using your experience and knowledge, list the challenges of implementing the circular economy in Africa. 1 being the biggest challenge, and 5 being the least challenging. On this one, it may not be as helpful to list all of the above. We may want to know which ones you see as the more pressing of the challenges available. There will be some multiple choice, and we'll come back to the results of this particular poll after our next round of speakers. And so we'll turn to Mr. Christopher Hurst, who's the Director General of the Projects Directorate of the European Investment Bank. And the question for you, Mr. Hurst, is what financial instruments does the EIB prioritize to de-risk circular economy investments? And how will these instruments be made available to African stakeholders? Over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this meeting. The European Investment Bank, for those of you who don't know, is the bank of the EU, owned by the 27 member states of the EU, and we are there to pursue EU policies also with partner countries. When we start this discussion, I think we can't repeat often enough that we face a triple crisis of climate, biodiversity, and the unequitable impacts of those on the parts, particularly on the poor. Now, these are interrelated, but not only. We are damaging the environment from chemical pollution and land take. And in this whole process, a key goal must be for us to use our resources more efficiently and move from a linear model of exploitation and discard to a circular model, which will, of course, also help reduce CO2, both in the manufacturing stage, because it takes less energy to recycle, but also in incinerating the waste that we inevitably end up. Now, waste management is a particular issue in Africa, as many of us will be aware. Waste collection is low, particularly in large cities, and of the order of half of the waste that is collected is disposed of in uncontrolled landfill and dump sites. Population growth, urbanization, and also greater affluence is increasing this waste and will put more pressure on it. We need substantial investment. The estimate that I have seen is of the order of 40 billion euros of investment, likely to triple by 2040. So we're talking a very large sums of money. But of course, as has already been mentioned, with that will come jobs and better jobs than exist today. We do have a clear challenge in front of us. Particular issue for the IB, an issue for all of us in this conference today, is the uncontrolled disposal of plastics, and in particular the discharge of plastics into the oceans. Now, it's important here to note that this also doesn't require just improved solid waste management, but also better wastewater and storm management to stop the plastics getting into the sea, where it's, of course, it's much more difficult to have remedial action to remove the plastic once it's dispersed in the oceans. We have currently 8 million tons of plastics being put in the sea every year, with another 1.5 million tons of microplastics. So this is increasing exponentially, and in fact, one frightening statistic is if we were to continue with our current rate, by 2050 there would be more plastic than there are fish in the sea. So we have a big challenge here. We at the EIB have launched our Clean Oceans initiative to deal with this, dealing with solid waste management on land and also, as I said, storm water management. And with our other Team Europe allies and partners, we have committed to invest 4 billion euros by 2025. We have many examples of projects of this, including in Africa. And for instance, we had a waste management and storm water management project in Cotonou recently. So for these and other circular economy projects, we can provide the complete range of financial instruments. In particular, what is relevant is a blending of loans with guarantees for risk management, and also a combination with loans with grants in order to cover investment gaps. But we do need to have the projects in order to fund. One thing is to have the finance available and ready to fund projects, but we also need to have the projects that are there. And that requires experience sharing, knowledge sharing between different partners, and there's a number of activities there which we all participate in. But also we can help mobilize with our partners in the European Commission. We can help mobilize technical assistance funds to help develop and prepare projects. There are many examples. Maybe just to mention one, we have our Clean Ocean project identification and preparation program, which was launched in 2020, with a particular goal to identify and prepare projects in solid waste management in sub-Saharan Africa. So maybe just to conclude, I mean, supporting the circular economy is a key challenge to deal with our environmental challenges, to cope with the climate challenge, to cope with the biodiversity loss, and also as a consequence to help support the just transition. And all of these things are of particular relevance in Africa, and so we at the EIB are happy to be partners in helping this process and doing what we can to deal with this particular task.
Thank you very much, Christopher, for really grounding us in some of the available financing instruments out there. I would imagine, particularly on your point, that the financing instruments are available, including some technical assistance funding, and what is lacking is the projects. I imagine there'll be a lot of questions around what are the entry points to surface such projects and hopefully access some of these instruments in short order. But perhaps we leave that to later in the session. Up next, and as we are in this hybrid format, I believe joining us online is Dr. Alhamdu Dorsuma, who's the Acting Director for Climate Change and Green Growth, responsible for the ACEA Secretariat, which is Africa Circular Economy Alliance at the African Development Bank. And Dr. Dorsuma, as the premier development finance institution of the continent, how does the AFDB support the mainstreaming of the circular economy as a development strategy for Africa? And what are the key bottlenecks to be addressed?
Thank you, moderator. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Hello? All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Indeed, we do see high potential for promoting circular economy as a development strategy in Africa. We see a lot of benefits ranging from socio-economic gains, from jobs creation, innovation, and industrialization, to several environmental benefits linked to resources and materials efficiency. So including, for instance, building resilience and also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So the potential is there, but the reality is that circular economic activities in Africa have remained largely in the informal economy so far. As a development finance institution in Africa, the African Development Bank aims to enable the proof of concept of circular economy as a bankable business model. We have recently launched our new strategic framework on climate change and green growth, which has been adopted last year. And this framework is named Projecting Africa's Voice. And under that new strategic framework, we have circular economy as a flagship initiative. We are put circular economy in the heart of our new policy on climate change and green growth for the next 10 years. There are two bottlenecks that we see at the African Development Bank. The first one is the policy gap, and the second one is the limited access to finance, as already mentioned earlier. On the first one, most policies aligned with circular economy principles in Africa are focused on waste management only. But you know that circular economy is not just about waste management. It is based on a complete set of economic systems from production to consumption and disposal. Therefore, we need to consider circular economy as a comprehensive framework, not just focusing on one particular area or sector. But the reality is also that in Africa, to date, there are only 2 African countries that have mentioned explicitly circular economy in their nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. These are Cote d'Ivoire and Cameroon. This tells us that the perception of circularity as a sustainable development model is not yet mainstream into our national climate policies. At the industrial level, there are also some policy gaps, especially on the regulation side, as well as on the standardization of activities that can enable greater circularity. We hope that with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, we can spur the development of regional value chains that can support the promotion of goods and services in the circular economy in Africa. The second bottleneck, which I'm going to finish with, is, as I mentioned, limited access to finance. This is critical because ultimately the role of a policy is to create a conducive environment for investments and business activities. So financing circular economy in Africa is critical, but yet it faces similar constraints as in other developing regions. Overall, there is a high risk perception due to the novelty of the concept and also the lack of metrics to measure circularity in Africa. Currently, as you may know, Africa only attracts 3% of global climate finance. Yet, we know that there are over 100 trillion of assets under management in the world for net zero. And this is a unique pool of liquidity that Africa needs to harness. For us, the goal is to turn Africa into the next emerging market for green investments. Actually, we did an assessment recently that showed that implementing the African nationally determined contributions on climate change presents itself a 3 trillion market opportunity by 2030 for the continent. We are currently launching the Africa Circular Economy Facility. It's a new fund, a thematic fund dedicated exclusively to circularity. And this is a fund made of contribution from our key partners, including Finland and the Nordic Development Fund, which I want to recognize here. And this is part of a business incubation program for testing circular business models in Africa. Let me finish by mentioning also that partnership is key in addressing the 2 major bottlenecks I have mentioned earlier. As a bank, we are leveraging our convening power as Africa's leading development finance institution to foster partnership that can help our regional member countries in the transition to circular economy. As you may know, since 2019, we have been hosting the Secretariat of the African Circular Economy Alliance, a government-led coalition that aims to accelerate the continent transition to circularity. We are actively engaging our member countries on the adoption of circular economy as a development strategy, and also help them support design national circular economy roadmaps that can help embed circularity within their wider sector policies and development planning tools, such as the NDCs that I have spoken about. So let me conclude by saying that mainstreaming circularity into development strategies and planning in Africa is key, and it is in the heart of our new strategic framework on climate change and green growth. And let me take this opportunity for inviting the African nations that have not yet joined the African Circular Economy Alliance to do so, so that the continent as a whole will be able to harness the opportunities presented by circular economy. I thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Dorsuma. I think we had just prior to this, and in particular, thank you for also outlining the critical role that circular economic opportunities embedded within national determined contributions, the role that they could play in creating a massive market and a drive of economic dynamism across the continent over the next decade. We had began this particular segment of comments from the various speakers with a question about what we saw as participants as the biggest challenges towards realizing a vision of a circular economy. And I wonder if we can now take a look at some of the results from that poll.
We have it.
We have the results now. Well, let's see what we thought was the most challenging. So using your experience and knowledge, the biggest challenge of implementing the circular economy. With 41.18%, conducive policy environment seems to be the key binding constraint, followed by capacity and knowledge, followed by access to finance, awareness and attitude, and access to markets. And again, to be clear, we're under no illusions that any one of these on its own, if solved, will get us to the answer, I'm sure. But that gives us a sense of where the people on this call and in this meeting see the biggest opportunity for action and for impact. With that, we'll pivot back into hearing from some of the people really at the front lines of this. And next up, we shall hear from Her Excellency Dr. Leila Ben Ali, Minister of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development of Morocco. And we're hoping to hear from you, Dr. Ben Ali, what plans are in place in Morocco to transition to a circular economy and how it fits within Morocco's wider development planning. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Honorable ministers and delegates, good afternoon and good morning, wherever you are. I think it's really a great pleasure for me to take part in this discussion on circularity, particularly in a post-COVID recovery period, and it's really a crucial issue for this continent. I would like to take this opportunity to really thank also the African Bank for Development and the African Circular Economic Alliances for inviting us to participate in this important side event. I'd also like to share with you some good news. The process of our adherence of Morocco to the ACAA is almost at the final stage, and you will receive, I think, next week, the official document. Circular economy really presents significant opportunities for Africa, and we have been practicing it, the principles of circular economy, for centuries, not for years, but for centuries. The circular economy will not only be an economic opportunity for our continent, but really a necessary paradigm for fostering sustainable economic development while decoupling it from resource consumption or monetization, if you may, and the negative environmental impacts. It could also be a social remedy to employment crisis affecting many African countries if innovation and training policies are adopted to accompany this green and inclusive transition. The recovery is an opportunity for Africa to build back better, be it in the primary sectors, in the secondary sectors, and in tertiary sectors. The widespread, acute economic, financial, and health crisis that this pandemic has led us has increased public awareness of the fragility of natural systems and the importance of human well-being. So in Morocco, because that was your question, our national strategy for sustainable development has already identified the circular economy as a strategic axis of intervention to achieve the transition to a green and inclusive economy. And it has already identified as a positive externality, which definitely needs to be incentivized. Within this framework, I'll talk briefly about the waste sector. It has been structured and improved through the implementation of the National Household Waste Program. Waste recovery strategy has been adopted to support the development of new green jobs in dignity and low carbon products. Very importantly, institutional, legal, and fiscal reforms were launched to address current challenges within the waste sector, to attract investments and drive innovation. We have key reforms that include the review of the sector's governance model, that's quite important, the adoption of an eco-tax on plastics, and the introduction of the extended producer responsibility principle. The waste sector has been integrated into the national strategy related to the biomass energy recovery, and because, like our dear friend Christopher from the EIB has pointed out, like in many parts of Africa, I think more than half of the waste is disposed in uncontrolled landfills, but the second challenge is that more than half of waste is organic. So it's quite difficult to manage. So in order to support the emergence of the circular value chains, public-private partnership programs were prepared in Morocco with the aim of establishing green ecosystems for various products, primary plastics, but also for paper, glass, batteries, etc. And we are mobilizing local voluntary initiatives like in other parts of Europe. Remaining firmly committed to the Paris Agreement, Morocco has elaborated in 2021 its long-term low emissions development strategy by 2050, based on revising our NDC and the strategic axis of our new development model. So in this, we see that the circular economy is the only solution that will overcome the twofold challenge of optimal waste management, bear in mind that the challenges that I mentioned earlier, and environmental preservation. So to reach these goals, our low carbon strategy is built around three priorities. We want to make the circular economy a sustainable and inclusive citizen project before anything else, creating sources and environmental value and economic attractiveness at the national and territorial levels. We want to create an integrated, massive, competitive, and efficient waste ecosystem. And we want to meet the new international environmental standards through decarbonizing the Moroccan economy and including strengthening the linkages with the EU Green New Deal. So before concluding, I think it's really important to stress that strong leadership, collaboration, and partnerships between governments, local actors, businesses, and we saw that in Morocco, NGOs, consumers, and citizens are required to conduct transformative actions for circular economy transitions and achieve really concrete results. Morocco, as you know, is already committed to support the efforts to advance partnerships in Africa for a just transition to the circular economy that contributes positively to the sustainable human development. So I would like to thank you for your attention and I hope that you will have successful deliberations at UNEA 5.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ben Ali, first of all, for that fantastic news of Morocco joining, fully stepping into the club, which I'm sure is a very exciting milestone, as well as for your observations, including a few themes starting to emerge, such as the adoption of extended producer responsibility in a number of countries and the power that can have in building on these centuries-old patterns and traditions and mechanisms that we already have in place. Also striking is a potential opportunity to link Africa's efforts with the European Green New Deal as an opportunity to potentially engage in interesting win-win partnerships of various kinds beyond just financing. So again, a lot of food for thought there. With that, as we progress down the chain, and with that, I'll open up some interventions from the floor, beginning with Professor Desta Mebratu of the UN High-Level Champions Initiative. Professor Mebratu, are you online?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Yes, I'm online.
Yes, it would be fantastic in a few short moments so we can have some time for Q&A. If you could just share a little bit about the effort you're engaged in through the UN High-Level Champions Initiative.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to join this session. I'm speaking on behalf of the United Nations High-Level Champions on Climate Change, which has an initiative on phasing out of open burning of waste in Africa, which aims at securing a multi-partnership and time-bounded commitment on phasing out open burning of waste from the region at COP27. As was pointed out by a number of distinguished speakers earlier, I think the issue of waste and the importance of promoting circularity in relation to waste management has been highlighted. But I just want to give you a brief facts with regards to where we are and what we are dealing with. According to the report produced by UNEP in 2018, by 2012, Africa generated 125 million tons of waste, of which only 4% at that time, which has now increased to about 10%, was recycled. And the bulk of the waste is disposed in open dumps. And as a result, in 2015, 19 of the world's 50 biggest dump sites were located in sub-Saharan Africa. While different streams of waste are contributing to the problem of open burning, the open waste burning at dump sites is the main contributor of notorious pollutants across Africa. As a result, over 1.2 million premature deaths occur every year in Africa due to exposure to air pollution, in which the waste sector is a significant source of fine particulate matters, contributing about approximately 29%. According to an estimate done by UNEP in 2018, 70 to 80% of municipal solid waste generated in African cities is recyclable, with a conservative estimated economic value of $8 billion per annum. And as was noted earlier, the informal sector is the major waste management service provider and driver of waste recycling in many parts of Africa, with a very limited recognition and support from national and local governments and international development partners. If we wish to overcome the existing challenge of open burning and waste management in Africa, we need to have attitudinal, institutional, and infrastructural and financial paradigm shifts in our development effort. And at the center of this paradigm shift is the need to recognize waste as a secondary resource and promote circularity across the production and consumption structures by putting job creation and livelihood provision for people at the center. The African Circular Economy Alliance, in our opinion, could be one of the major catalysts in bringing about such paradigm shifts in the waste management sector. And finally, we call upon all African countries, regional and international partners to join us in the UN High-Level Champions Initiative of phasing out open burning of waste from Africa at COP27. I thank you very much.
Definitely not a league table in which Africa should be proud to have 19 of the top 50 in terms of the open dump sites. And I think the goal you've set out for the continent and eradicating open burning is a fantastic one. Dr. Arab Kubala, you've been engaged in Switch Africa and a range of other initiatives. I'd invite you to say a few words on the SEED initiative that you are currently anchoring.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity for a brief intervention. But first, as it has been put in the concept note for this meeting, I would say yes, circular economy has been applied for generations in Africa. But as was stated by one of the speakers, it was mainly in the informal economy. So first and mainly by the small and medium enterprises, which I would call the elephant in the room. And the elephant in all the international conferences. These SMEs are closer to nature and to communities than large companies and government. Still, they are rarely duly considered, associated, provided needed support to indeed accelerate this just a transition to circular economy in Africa, as we're calling it. In COP26, there were no one representing the SMEs. Through my long career in UNEA5, I retired only 5 years ago. I have been actively promoting sustainable consumption, production, and resource efficiency policies and programs. Many of the policies are well embedded in UNEP strategies, and most of the programs are still up and running, such as the 10YFP, initiatives on building, food, tourism, procurement, and the EU Switch program in Asia, Africa, and the Mediterranean that were all started from my unit when I was in UNEP. But in general, we were not able to associate the small and medium enterprises, still the elephant in the room. When we look at the leaving no one behind equation, you have the governments, the large companies, and the people. But in general, the most important stakeholders and actors on the ground, the ones who deliver circularity at their level and can accelerate and scale up if provided adequate enabling capacities, are missing. I'm again referring to the small and medium enterprises, those called sometimes the missing middle. Here are two enlightening examples of innovative African entrepreneurs with which SEED has been working, examples among thousands that just need due attention in order to scale up their work. Helen Refuse Collection Services in Zimbabwe, a SEED awardee. They provide door-to-door services to households and corporates. They provide bins and to support clients on their own waste management. They promote recycling in local communities and providing stable local employment. They contribute to a cleaner and healthy living environment. They reduce the landfill waste by more than 3,000 tons, and they're recycling and selling for around 60% of all waste recycled. Another example from South Africa, Siyabodi, a low carbon awardee from SEED. They train community members on waste collection and separation. They collect waste for a fee and sell waste to recyclers. They redirect waste from landfill. They manufacture plastic bricks from recycled plastic bags and provide local employment to youth. Just two examples among thousands in Africa and elsewhere in the world. With regard to the financial need to which we have been referring, I was trying to handle the issue and the Switch Asia that I've been managing for the last 5 years. It is obvious that the banking system has to change their mindset vis-a-vis funding, because the small and medium enterprises do not need big tickets. It's small amount that the big banks have difficulties managing. So we need to think carefully about that. SEED, established in 2002 by UNEP, UNDP, and IUCN to promote entrepreneurship, has been working with hundreds of such innovative eco-inclusive SMEs, mainly in Africa for some 20 years, demonstrating how they contribute to green and circular economy, making the economic case for it, as well as to climate mitigation and adaptation in the transition to sustainability. And it is precisely with the aim to further promote innovation and circularity with these critical small and medium enterprises stakeholders to enhance, expand, accelerate, and scale up their action that we will be launching soon, together with various partners, including UNEP, Go for SDGs, the 10YFP, and Germany, a global initiative called the Coalition for Innovation, Circularity, and Entrepreneurship, to provide voice for the SMEs and their green climate action. I hope you will join us. In any case, we will be behind you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Hobala. I think something that strikes me in what you outlined is that continuing challenge of intermediation at scale in order to route capital to small and medium-sized enterprises. And it's manifesting in particular on this issue of the circular economy, but it is that age-old challenge of how do you take the billions that Chris and others have to deploy and turn it into the hundreds of thousands that can actually be funded into businesses successfully. For our last intervention, before we turn to Q&A from the floor, Mustafa Kamal Gaye of the ILO, perhaps talking about this from the world of labor.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Moderator, Excellencies. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to share a few perspectives on this subject. I'm a global coordinator for green jobs at the International Labour Office, and naturally, we have been looking at the labor and the social dimensions of the circular economy. Now, what comes very clearly from analysis is that we are on a positive narrative. With the changes in production systems, we will see more job gains than job displacement. Although there would be significant displacement of employment, but at the end, it is a positive narrative. So therefore, the central question is not really the quantity of jobs, but the quality of employment. And there, we have been looking at a few issues that we think are important for policy and for regulatory frameworks. One is occupational safety and health. We see many workers in the circular economy, in particular in recycling of textile, plastic, and electronics. So these are three sectors in particular where we paid attention to and found serious issues about occupational safety and health. The second important point is about wages. People are working, but still being part of what we call the working poor. They cannot really make enough to earn a decent living. A lack of social security. And this relates to the fourth point, which is formalization. So therefore, the core of the sustainability agenda in relation to circular economy and decent work is about formalization. Now, there has been work going on in this area through a number of programs. So I could just mention the Partnership for Action on the Green Economy, where we have, together with UNEP, UNDP, UNIDO, and UNITA, have the pleasure to be working in South Africa. There has been some work in the Free State, particularly in the waste management. Morocco just joined PAGE, and with UNIDO, we are just right now about programming work there. And I just wanted to mention one important initiative that the UN Secretary General launched at the General Assembly last September, which is a global accelerator for jobs and social protection for a just transition. So it's a massive effort to really roll out social protection for 400 million jobs using all kinds of possibilities. And I think that will be an important driver in making employment in the circular economy decent and moving out of the informal economy, which is wide, as many have said. So again, thank you so much, and we look forward to further engagement in this process.
And thank you for, again, recentering us at that critical juncture of dignity in livelihoods and decency of work that comes from really making improvements in the protection of the workers. There are a number of questions that have come in and comments that have come in. I will try and do a few of them justice, and maybe what I will do is I will read out a set of 3 of them and then open up the floor for comments from those here present among the speakers. The first is from Noura Mohamed Salah from Tunisia's Ministry of Education, who notes that to apply the circular economy, we will need to leverage technologies such as artificial intelligence, remote data sensing, and a whole range of other innovations, as well as some tangible policies for the circular economy. And the question is how we make, how do we actually draw and connect innovations or technological capabilities that are coming from, for lack of a better word, the global north, and apply it practically against some of the challenges and opportunities in the global south. So we essentially leapfrog in some of our solutions through the application of new technologies and new innovations. That's one question or reflection. Linda Godfrey from South Africa is thrilled to see the systems approach to the circular economy in this session. It's not just about waste, and notes that the CSIR in South Africa has published 8 short notes on the circular economy that are available on the very same. So urging that we examine those, and there's a link that she provides. And then finally, Bernard Ogembo of Eco Rethink says developing countries are the current dominant centers of production and the future centers of consumption in the global economy. However, waste remains a major environmental and public health challenge. We also find that many middle and lower income countries have a wealth of circular economy activities already happening. Why is this activity not being captured in analyses, yet it could provide a starting point for broader circular economy strategies at national, regional, or even global level? As I read that question, I do note that actually in many of the ministerial statements, and indeed a lot of the other statements, there is that recognition of the vast array of ongoing informal activity. And I think this might tie to the previous question on technology. How do we begin to surface and recognize this activity better, perhaps by using technologies of sensing and analytics and so on to do so? So those are the 3 comments or questions that came in. Rather than point them at any one person, I will open up for some closing reflections prompted by those comments from our distinguished discussion or discussants today. Perhaps in the order that they spoke, but I will not call upon names in case folks just want to pop in.
Can I come? Thank you. I'll take the first one, which is extremely important: innovation and technology. Of course, the developing countries, or what we call the global south, need the technology from the global north. But this is not the way to go first. We have been proving it, not only us, that innovation is contextualized, done at local level, and that's the one that is for long term and will have an impact. Then you can strengthen it by something that comes from outside. If you take something first from outside and try to adapt it, you will face problems and then you fail. This is the simple mathematical observation. We have seen it with the thousands of cases which we have been working. There is a misunderstanding about innovation, that innovation is first high-tech, big companies, big countries. No. Innovation can be very small, very localized, and this is the best innovation. And on this one, you can build something that makes sense, you can build resilience, and then you will be strong enough to absorb something from outside and adapt it to your context.
The critical thing, tying to your earlier comment, is how do you feed capital, that local grounded innovation, to allow it to scale? Chris?
Okay, just one reaction is I agree fully with the notion that we have to split innovation in process from innovation in technology. And so the innovation in process and how we do things and how we manage things is the first thing. And then we have to see what technology is appropriate for that particular process. And we have to also bear in mind that some technologies are more labor intensive than others, and you would want to be presumably choosing one which has the right labor intensity for the situation you're in, and not necessarily having robots that are sorting your waste for you, which you might have in Yemen, for example. So that's one point. The other question you've raised is how do you get the money to a smaller scale operation? Well, that has to be done through the banking sector. I mean, there's no other vehicle to get small loans out there. Organizations of my own, it's totally impossible for us to reflect on having small loans to local businesses other than through banking partners. But then the question is, how do you get banking partners to be a partner in this process? And that comes about, for at least for the EIB, and we're looking to also for banks to think about their ESG procedures and goals and to present them transparently, which in itself is therefore leading them to get involved in these activities and seeing the value of these activities as a business model for them. But that's the question. You have to persuade banks it's a good business model for them to be doing this kind of activity.
Thank you. From many years at Dalberg, fixing the banking system to be more oriented towards the grassroots of Africa's economies is a challenge and continues to be a challenge, but hopefully one where we're seeing some green shoots of progress. Opening the floor for a last few set of comments before we close out. Honorable Minister Kusi.
Thank you very much. I just thought it might be interesting to comment on this question about the interface between what I would call the original concept of waste management as being firstly a public health issue and secondly an environmental protection issue. And a new realization that waste management can also be an economic sector. And I think some of the difficulties that we would have is that we haven't fully integrated our understanding of how those two understandings of waste management fit together. So in our own country, we would still have an objective to expand the public waste collection and to expand separation at source with an intention of reaching waste diversion from landfill objectives. But parallel with that, we have an understanding that in fact there can be revenue streams generated from waste, and there can be employment created from those revenue streams. And I think that it's working to harmonize those two objectives that we haven't completely got right yet. And so you find that often things that we do are contradictory. So the issue that I was talking about the role of informal waste reclaimers clashing with the formal role of organized labor in waste collection is an example of the ways in which our public policy doesn't fully synergize. And I think that we've got to do a lot more thinking about that in order that we can fully realize both the environmental and public health objectives and the circular economy objectives.
Thank you. Any?
Well, one point I think in terms of the very important question on systems approach is that we have been looking at the enterprise development approach, and what Arap is saying about SMEs is really fundamental for that, so that you get them into waste value chains and the circular economy value chains. But I just wanted to mention also that there is an approach of cooperatives and the social solidarity economy, which we have found to be very much suited in the context of Africa, where you work with informal waste collectors and getting them to organize in cooperatives. So that gets them into a different form of enterprise. But we have seen some very promising results with that approach, and we'll be quite keen to engage in pursuing that work.
So with that, and stepping back a moment, I think we've again recentered on the circular economy and recognizing that as part of the work of the Circular Economy Alliance and other efforts, this has been an ongoing conversation. And as it should, it continues to center on the same things: access to finance, the need to formalize and bring dignity to a massive sector, the need for new incentives and policies, the need for more membership from African countries to step forward and take ownership of these processes and drive them and adopt them across the board. I think, and most importantly, that need to think in terms of systems, integrated systems that often extend far beyond a very narrow understanding of circular economy as just being about waste or just being about one particular sector or stream. I think what's heartening about these conversations, certainly sitting where I am, having had the chance to check in on them periodically, is the questions remain, but interesting answers continue to accumulate. Some common trends, some policies beginning to find traction. And so I think we still have a lot of work to do. But at the same time, there is this sense that we are clearer now on some of the opportunities to do it, some of the partnerships that are emerging, and some of the examples of success that we can build upon. So with particular thanks to the honored participants and discussants here, honorable ministers, our hosts at UNEP, the various speakers, and all of you who've joined in this conversation, I think we will not end today's discussion. We will rather pause it, get back to work, come back to the table again, and report on how we're progressing towards creating a true circular economy agenda for the continent as a whole. Thank you.
The theme of the resumed fifth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly calls for strengthened action, protect and restore nature and the nature-based solutions to achieve Agenda 2030. The circular economy approach provides an opportunity to promote nature-based solutions, stimulate a sustainable consumption and production economy, create employment, address resource efficiencies, promote sustainable consumption and production practices, and protect the environment as countries transition to a green economy. But what is a circular economy? This concept implies designing products for using them as long as possible, reusing, refurbishing, or remanufacturing products at the end of their service life, and recovering or recycling a maximum of resources to avoid waste in production, supply, use, and disposal. While it is known that Africa has been using circularity principles for many generations, there are now great opportunities to harness the circular economy to improve livelihoods and reduce poverty. We have already seen success stories where business streams and enterprises have taken up these opportunities. What is currently missing are the opportunities to scale up and replicate such efforts across the continent in a more organized approach. The Africa Office of UNEP has been implementing programs on resource efficiency, notably the Switch Africa Green Program. This program focuses on promoting green business development in the region. Results of the program show increased incomes, job creation, increased productivity, wealth creation, improved health, improved compliance, competitive advantage, among others. The 17th session of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, held in Durban in November 2019, identified circular economy as one of the areas where action needs to be taken to promote environmental sustainability and prosperity in Africa. Circular economy approaches galvanize and spur green investments, partnerships, and continued innovation. Therefore, a system-wide approach and behavioral change is required to transition towards a more circular economy. This entails countries having very strong political messaging systems that inspire stakeholders to invest in policy change and actions. It also requires financing mechanisms to ensure access to capital for firms of all sizes and a critical mass of people with the capacity to implement the circular economy principles. The success of this transition will be determined by the number and strength of collaborative partnerships Africa can build. Together we can. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.